Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
I see Alex, Madhu Mataji, Madhu Mataji, Hare Krishna, Shalu Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Namrata Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare
Mataji,
Hare Krishna.
Mary Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
How is everyone doing?
Super Prabhu.
Good. I see the okay sign from Alesh.
Yeah.
That's good. And so it's been a little hectic for me, but I'm okay now. So I'm going to share the screen and put the Pranami mantra. And let's see. Share the screen. Pranami mantra. Share. Who would like to do the prayers today?
I can do, Prabhuji.
Wonderful.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mother. How are you?
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Good. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, go ahead.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha kalpatarubhascha Kripasindhuvaiva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Bolo Shri Shri
Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you, Mother. Okay. Any questions from last week before we proceed to this week?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Madhav Prabhu. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Ramapriya Prabhu. How are you?
Good Prabhu. How are you?
Great. So, any questions from last week? So I'll ask you a question. And what did we talk about last week?
Anshuman.
Nimi.
Okay.
Anshuman Maharaj.
Maharaj Nimi.
Anshuman's Katha.
Maharaj Nimi, yes. What else?
Part of Rama too.
I'm sorry?
Summarizing.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Maharaj Anshuman's Katha.
Okay. Was there anything in particular that stuck with you?
We were talking about Ganga and
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main one.
The Ganga.
The descent of Mother Ganges to planet Earth.
And
And who was-
Harishchandra.
Yes, Harishchandra, of course. And who was the last person who succeeded in bringing
Bhagirath.
Bhagirath?
Bhagirath.
Yes. And that's why Ganga is also known as Bhagirathi, right?
Yeah.
Also, we talked about why Ganga is called Janhavi. And what was the story there?
Because it is on the bank.
I'm sorry?
It is at that place, the call as Jan. That place.
No.
I need a little bit more.
In front of Janu Rishi's ashram, I think Ganga was stopped. I think he, I don't know, stopped or drank.
He drank it.
He drank it, yeah.
Because she was making his paraphernalia for Aarti flow away with him, with her. So he drank the whole Ganga. And there was Bhagirath, running in his chariot very fast and hearing the sound of Ganga flowing, and suddenly it stopped. There was no Ganga. So he came back and he figured out what happened. And so he apologized and prayed to Janu Rishi. So he released her. And that's when she got the name Janhuvi, almost like a daughter of Janu. Okay, all right. So let's then move to this week. And we're going to start with chapter 14, which is titled King Pururava Enchanted by Urvashi. So now, excuse me, I'm going to mute everyone because there's a lot of children shouting in the background. Okay, that's better. That's much better. Okay, all right. Yeah, so you probably heard the name Atri, and Atri was the son of Lord Brahma. He had a son by the name of Som. In Canada, he's called Soma. In India, it's called Som, which is the same as the moon god. You probably know Somvar, Mangalvar. So Som is that moon god. Somvar means Monday in English. So Som was Atri's son, who was the son of Lord Brahma. And as you also know that moon god is the king of all kinds of drugs. He's also known as the king of the stars, although sun sometimes object to that. But anyway, Som conquered the entire universe at one time, and that made him really puffed up. So in that state of being puffed up, he did something abominable, which is he kidnapped the wife of Brihaspati. Who knows who's Brihaspati? Who's Brihaspati?
He's a teacher of Devatas.
Correct, the spiritual master of all the demigods. So he kidnapped his Guru's wife. And even though Brihaspati requested Som to return his wife, repeatedly he requested, but Som simply refused to do that. Well, as you know, the enemies are always looking for an opportunity to cause one harm. So Shukracharya, being the spiritual master of the demons, is an enemy of Brihaspati, because Brihaspati is the spiritual master of demigods. So immediately Shukracharya took the side of Soma in this fight or dispute that was going on and instigated a war between demigods and the demons. And this was going on, a fierce war. When Lord Brahma heard about this whole incident of Soma kidnapping Brihaspati's wife and this a war between demons and demigods starting, he called Som and said, "What are you doing?" He really chastised him very severely and asked Som to return his Brihaspati's wife immediately to Lord Brahma. And then Lord Brahma took Tara, the wife of Brihaspati, to her husband Brihaspati. And then he also stopped the fighting. He said, "Enough." It's like fathers telling two children, "Stop fighting, enough, done. Go to your room." So basically that's what he did. But by then, Tara had already become pregnant by Som. So Brihaspati confronted her and called her unchaste. And he said, "I don't want you to carry this baby in your womb any longer. Deliver the child immediately and demand it. You deliver the child immediately." So she did. Immediately she produced a child, which was very, very beautiful. It had a golden bodily hue, just beautiful. once they saw the child, both Som and Brihaspati desired that child as their own. And that started another fight between them. Because now they were claiming the child as theirs. Brihaspati was saying, I'm the husband. And Som was saying, but I'm the real father. So, I mean, as they were trying to fight, a lot of sages, a lot of demigods got involved. And they called Tara and said, you tell us whose child is this boy? But she was so ashamed and embarrassed, she did not answer. So as she was hesitating, the child, the little baby actually spoke up. And he became very angry and he demanded that she tell the truth immediately. But she still did not answer. So Lord Brahma was there. He took Tara to a secluded place and asked her the same question. So to him she confessed and she said that actually it is Som's son, the son of Soma. Brahma immediately took the charge of the child. He was so impressed by the child's intelligence, he called him Budh. Budh, the literal meaning of Budh is very intelligent. And you also have Budhavar, which is Wednesday. So that's named after this child. So this boy, Budh, married Ila, and there is a son by the name of Pururava, whose story we're going to discuss. So I'm sure all of you have heard the name Urvashi. Everyone know who Urvashi is?
She's the Apsara.
She's an Apsara, the heavenly damsel. And so once Narad Muni, as you know, is wandering around planet to planet to planet, and he was once visiting the heavenly planets. And there he started talking about Pururava's beauty and all the other amazing qualities he had. And just like Rukmini had been captivated by the qualities and the form and the beauty of Lord Krishna, having heard from Narad Muni, Urvashi got captivated by the beauty and the fame and the qualities of Pururava. And she came down immediately to planet Earth and she saw Pururava, handsome guy, and Pururava saw Urvashi, and he was taken by her beauty as well. So they saw each other, and as they say in Hindi, kuch kuch hone laga. You know, there was no aag lagi dono taraf, which means basically that they had, you know, a fluttering of heart, and they were really, excuse me, they were taken by each other and felt a great degree of attraction towards each other. Excuse me. And so Pururava spoke to her and said that, you know, please introduce yourself. And she told who she was, and he told her how attracted he was to her, and Pururava asked Urvashi to have a relationship with him. She immediately agreed because she was also so attracted. But she did two things. One is she was carrying two little lambs with her. And so she gave the responsibility to take care of her two lambs, whom she was treating like her own children. And she put another condition that she will leave Pururava if she ever saw him naked at any time except when they were in bed. Pururava thought it was a strange condition, but he was so infatuated, he couldn't say no. And he accepted her condition. And they started living as husband and wife. Now, as you said, Urvashi is from heavenly planets. And the king of heavenly planets is Indra. And he spends majority of his time listening to music and watching the girls dance and just having a great time. Urvashi is considered one of the most beautiful apsaras or heavenly damsels. So very quickly he noticed that she's not there in her assembly. So he inquired, "Hey, where is Urvashi?" And people told him that she had gone to the earthly planet and had got married to Pururava and she was having a great time there. When he heard that, he requested the Gandharvas, who are a type of demigods, very good singers and dancers, and very good looking as well. So he ordered some of the Gandharvas to go down to the planet Earth and bring her back. She's been gone long enough, he said. So the Gandharvas came to Earth at midnight, and Pururava and Urvashi were in bed. And the Gandharvas stole the two lambs. I thought I muted everybody, but everybody please make sure you're muted. I hear children in the background. Okay. So as they were stealing the, excuse me, as they were stealing the lambs, those lambs started to cry. And they were crying for Urvashi, saying, "Please save me." So Urvashi called Pururava a real coward. And what kind of a king are you? You cannot even save my two sons that I asked you to protect. And she said a few other choice words to him. Well, stung by her sharp words, Pururava got up immediately from his bed. Without bothering to dress up, he picked up his sword and went out naked to follow those Gandharvas who were taking the two lambs with them. When the Gandharvas saw that the king is chasing them, they quickly gave up the two lambs. But immediately they started to shine very brightly, just like lightning. And with their lightning, they illuminated the whole house of Pururava. Not realizing what's going on and just being happy that he was able to rescue the two lambs, and now his wife Urvashi will be happy with him and reward him, he walked into the room carrying those two lambs. But now there was a lot of light in that room. So Urvashi saw him naked, and as per her condition that she had put at the time of their first meeting, she left. Well, that was not tolerable to Pururava, and he was greatly disturbed, and he almost became a madman, and he started traveling around the world, just like literally like a madman. So as he was traveling around the world, he went to a place called Kurukshetra. You all know Kurukshetra, where the Mahabharata battle happened. So same place. Different time, but same place. And he saw Urvashi there again. And you can imagine what his condition was. He immediately approached her and started begging her, pleading with her to please kindly rejoin me. I can't live without you. And he said, "I'm going to kill myself if you don't join me again." So she said, "I really don't want to, but because you're in such a pitiable condition and you're threatening to kill yourself, I'll join you, but only for one night at the end of every year. That's it, one night a year." So Pururava did not have a choice. He accepted, but he also realized or understood that Urvashi at that time was pregnant with his child, which made him very happy. So 1 year later, Pururava saw Urvashi again. By this time, she had a son. That was his son. Same place, Kurukshetra. And of course, he was very, very happy to spend the night with her. But when he thought of, her leaving him again, he was absolutely overwhelmed by grief. Like Urvashi could tell how bad the situation is. So Urvashi said, you know what? Why don't you worship the Gandharvas? They will deliver me again to you. So Pururava prayed to the Gandharvas like crazy and actually satisfied the Gandharvas with his prayers. So Gandharvas gave him a woman known as, actually whose name was Agnisthali, but she looked exactly like Urvashi. And initially Pururava thought he's got his Urvashi back, was very happy, and he was enjoying with her. But he very quickly realized that this is not Urvashi. And he did not want this girl called Agnisthali, even though she looked exactly like Urvashi, because she was not Urvashi. So he said, no, I'm sorry, I don't want you. You can leave. And he left. Excuse me. So after he got home, he spent an entire night meditating upon Urvashi. The funny thing is that in the course of his meditation through the whole night, the age changed from Satyug to Treta Yuga. So you may recall, what's the process for self-realization in the age of Satyug? Anybody?
Tapasya.
Tapasya, yes, very good. Meditation. And what is the process in Treta Yuga?
Fire sacrifice?
Fire sacrifice, exactly. So now the process for self-realization changed from meditation to fire sacrifice. So Pururava performed a great fire sacrifice. But the purpose of the fire sacrifice was to fulfill his fruitive desires, material desires, and they definitely appeared in his heart. So then he went back to the place where he had left Agnisthali, and there he saw actually there was a tree. It's called Shami tree. I don't know exactly what kind of tree that is, but Bhagavatam says it was Shami tree, and from it had come out a Ashwatha tree, which is the banyan tree. So Pururava made 2 sticks from this tree and chanted mantras, meditating upon the lower wood as Urvashi and upper wood as himself, and the piece in the middle as their son, and he produced a fire. And he performed the sacrifice with this fire, but this time the purpose was to satisfy Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as you know, the only way to satisfy all our desires is to satisfy the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So having done that, Pururava was happy, and he was able to go back to the Gandharva Loka where Urvashi lived. And this time they lived like normal men and women, or how should I say husband and wife. Now, I'm going to stop here because that's the end of the chapter. Are there any questions or comments before I move to the next chapter?
Prabhu, I just want to know, Lord Shiva is also known as Soma, is he?
No.
No?
He's known as Ashutosh.
Yeah, there is. Okay.
I never heard that.
Okay.
If he is, then I don't know.
I don't know. I heard somewhere. Okay. I'm not too sure.
Sorry, I'm not sure. Okay, anyone else? No questions or comments?
Yes, Prabhu. Actually, I'd like to know the deeper meaning behind the story.
The deeper meaning behind the story is simply this. If you don't control your lusty desires, then you're doomed, because the process for satisfying lusty desires, the material process for satisfying lusty desires is like trying to satisfy your itch once you have developed an eczema. The natural tendency is to scratch it. And if one has eczema in one part of the body and you scratch it, in the beginning it feels really good, almost a sense of relief. But very quickly you find 2 things. One is that the place you just scratched now actually has some wounds in it. It's red and the skin is peeling because you scratch so hard. The second thing you find is that eczema has spread through your body because after scratching that affected part, every part of your body you touch also develops eczema. So now you're totally polluted, quote unquote polluted.
Mm.
The same thing. The message is try to control your senses. Do not forget your prescribed duties. Don't accept this, silly, funny conditions just to obtain a woman because it means nothing but miseries. Prabhupada also mentions in one of the purpose in this chapter is that there are story after story after story of men getting into a lot of trouble because they could not control themselves upon seeing a beautiful woman. So there's a lesson for men also that's important to control your urges if you want to have a long-term happy life. So that's basically the purpose of, or the message from the story.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. Anyone else?
Also, Prabhuji, like the king Pururava was ready to do anything for her. So it tells us the bitter reality of the material relationships, that no matter how much we try to satisfy and what we are doing for the other person, the reality is that the person is going to leave us one day. So the reason could be, I mean, it could be the material separation or the death or anything, but the material relationships won't last long. So there is no point just giving our head to them.
Very good point. Yes, absolutely. Actually, Prabhupada does say that, but he uses slightly different words. So I didn't want to say that in this. But basically, he says that, I'm going to say it, but it's not, these are not my words, Prabhupada's words. He said, you can't trust women to be with you all the time. So I don't want to say that, but you made me say it. Okay, anything else?
Prabhuji, I just had, because we are so many females here, and you
That's
said
why I was
this
hesitating.
sentence. So I just wanted to put this point forward, that once somebody had asked this question from Srila Prabhupada disciple about why the women are being quoted like this. So I think you also had given us this answer once, that when Shukdev Goswami was narrating Bhagavatam, it was for the brahmacharis, the male assembly. So that's why the woman word comes up, but otherwise all these teachings and all these quotations, they are vice versa. So if men should not be lusty or attracted towards the opposite sex, so same applies for us, for women as well. It's not that only. So the butterfly logic is for both the genders, basically.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm glad you made this point, because sometimes people, women especially, misunderstand what's being said. So it's whatever applies to man applies to women also, because frankly, the nature is the same. The modes of material nature is the same, whether it's a woman body or a man body. So there's no distinction in the actions and reactions and the tendencies. That's independent of that type of body, male or female, you have. So I'm glad you made that point. Thank you.
And also because these teachings are eternal, and today if I have a woman body, next birth I could have a male body as well. So the logic always remains the same.
Absolutely, absolutely right.
Thank you.
And it's all said and done, we're not this body. So
right. So I said this because I know many of my friends who take it the other way. Why women? So since we are many women here, so I thought I should bring
thank
this
you.
up.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much.
And Prabhuji also, like on this, our acharyas and all, they comment that Prabhupada also, most of the from senior devotees I have heard that when Prabhupada talks like that, we also need to understand that he is talking about those who are not in the bhakti, those who are not in the devotional service, irrespective of male and woman, as we discussed and explained by you and very well by Sonam Mataji. So Prabhupada was, but his way of telling was like, for those who are not in the devotional service, they definitely will not allow. If the woman of the house is not a devotee, she'll make sure that the male of the devotee will never ever become a devotee. I have seen it personally in so many cases.
Yes, for sure.
So yeah, this is what I think also heard from the senior devotees and the Maharajas.
Yes, I agree. Totally agree with you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Okay, all right, let's move to the next chapter then. And now we get to the story of Parashuram. So we're talking about Pururava and Urvashi. They ended up having 6 sons. And one of the descendants was known as Gadhi, who had a daughter by the name of Satyavati. Not the same Satyavati as Mahabharata, the wife of Shantanu, but another different Satyavati. And he got her married to a rishi called Richika. So once the wife, Satyavati of Richika Muni, and her mother were sitting talking, and they were both desirous of having a son. So they requested Richika Muni to prepare an oblation for a fire sacrifice, which would give them a son. So Richika Muni agreed, and he prepared one oblation for his wife with a Brahmin mantra, and another for his mother-in-law with a Kshatriya mantra. A simple reason was that the mother-in-law was married to a Kshatriya king, and the daughter was married to a Brahmin. So that was the only reason. So, excuse me. So the idea was that therefore, the person who's taking the Brahman mantra oblation, intended to be for his wife, would be a Brahmin, and his mother-in-law, she's married to a Kshatriya person, and so her son would be Kshatriya. And then he prepared it, and then before he started the process, excuse me, he went out for a bath. Now, Satyavati's mother saw the 2 oblations, and she understood that one is for her daughter, one is for her, and she started thinking kind of, something. Well, I'll explain that anyway. So, and she thought that the oblation that the rishi has prepared for her daughter must be better because she is his wife. And so I should really go for the better oblation. Not realizing this Brahman and Kshatriya thing. She just thought it would be better quality. So she asked her daughter, can we exchange? I drink yours and you drink mine. So, again, Satyavati also did not know the difference. So she said, sure, mother, you can take mine and I'll take yours. So Satyavati's mother drank Satyavati's oblation, and Satyavati drank her mother's oblation. When Richika Muni came back from his bath and understood what had happened when he had gone out for his bath, he said to his wife, Satyavati, my dear wife, you have done a great wrong. Now your son will be a fierce Kshatriya, able to punish everyone. And your brother, which is your mother's son, will be a learned scholar in spiritual science. In other words, a Brahmin. Satyavati was very scared when she heard that. And she started to pray and try to pacify Richika Muni with very nice, peaceful words. And she said, I don't want my son to be a fierce Kshatriya. I want a Brahmin. So Richika Muni said, well, fine, I can change it, but then all it means is that your grandson will be a Kshatriya. Your son would be a Brahmin. So as a result, Satyavati had a son, a very famous son by the name of Jamdagni. Jamdagni, when he grew up, he married a woman by the name of Renuka, and they had a son named Parashuram. Parashuram, as some of you know, is known as Shaktiyavesh avatar of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shaktiyavesh means empowered incarnation. In other words, this is a Jiva Tattva person but has been empowered to act almost like a Vishnu Tattva person. But he's not Vishnu Tattva, he's Jeev Tattva. That's called empowered. So another example is King Prithu, for example. And as we'll discuss in a minute, it was Lord Parashuram who annihilated the Kshatriyas from this earth, not once, not twice, not 10 times, not 20 times, but 21 times. So we'll talk about that in a second. Because Parikshit Maharaj said to Shukadeva Goswami, wait a minute, why would a empowered incarnation of the Lord will eliminate Kshatriyas from this whole earth, not once, not twice, not 10 times, but 21 times? So Shukadeva Goswami said, good question, let me answer it. And he started talking about a king whose name was Kartavirya Arjun. Now, Kartavirya Arjun had performed great austerities for another demigod by the name of Dattatreya. And in benediction, he received 1,000 arms, which made him completely undefeatable by any of his enemies. Again, when that happens, you become puffed up. So one day, he was swimming or taking a bath in the river Narmada, and he was fooling around, horsing around, as they say, and he stopped the flow of the whole river with his 1,000 arms. So when the flow stopped, the water started flowing in the reverse direction. So it was going east, it started going west. And it flooded the camp of another very famous person by the name of Ravana. Ravana had set up a camp at the bank of Narmada a few miles down, and now his entire camp became flooded. You can imagine how angry he would be. He said, what is this? Who's doing that? And he started looking for the person and found Kartavirya Arjun playing in the river with his girlfriends. And he started to insult him, like started hurling insults at Kartavirya very badly. Really insulted in front of his girlfriends. Well, that obviously upset Kartavirya Arjun, and he very easily arrested Ravana. I mean, believe it or not, he very easily defeated, that's how powerful he was, Ravana, and put him in custody, like in a cage, just like a monkey. And then after a while, he released him, and Prabhupada says he released him neglectfully. Like, with a real, smirk on your face, looking down at the person saying, yeah, get out, you're not worth my time. So that's how powerful he was. So anyway, one time this Kartavirya Arjun was wandering around the forest, and he happened to approach the house of Jamdagni. Jamdagni, the Brahmin, of course, very nicely received the king and his entire army and fed them sumptuously, very sumptuously. The king was amazed that a Brahmin can do that. I, as a king, can't do that. So he asked, how are you able to do that? And Jamdagni pointed to his desired cow, Kamdhenu. I said, she can produce any amount of food, or she can do anything she wants. So Kartavirya Arjun's reaction was, I'm a king, I can't do that. How can this Brahmin do that? So he encouraged his soldiers to steal the cow. Well, Parashuram wasn't there at that time. When he came back, he heard from his father that the king had come and stolen the cow, which made Parashuram very, very angry. He took his chopper and his bow and arrows and started to chase Kartavirya Arjun. Very, very angry mood. And he finally caught up to the king and he killed him. Not only he killed him, he killed his entire army. Kartavirya Arjun had, many, many sons, and they all ran away from the battlefield to save their life. And Parashuram, after killing all these people, soldiers and the king himself, brought back the desired cow to his father and narrated the whole story of what had happened and how he had killed the king and everybody else. Well, contrary to his expectation, Jamdagni, the father, was not very happy. I told Parashuram, you shouldn't have done that. He said, killing a king is more sinful than killing a Brahmin. And that you are a Brahmin, or at least, by birth, and as a Brahmin, you should have tolerated. That's one of the qualities of a Brahmin, tolerance. And Jamdagni told his son Parashuram, you should atone for your sin by traveling to all the holy places. So Parashuram did. And that's the end of this chapter. I'm going to pause again and see if anybody has any questions or comments before I proceed. Yes, Avni Mataji?
Prabhuji, I just want to know, this Satyavati who you're talking about, is she Vishwamitra's sister?
Well, Gadhi is the father of Vishwamitra also. So yes, that does make her sister. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, all right, then I'll keep going. So now we are at chapter 16. One time, Jamdagni asked his wife Renuka to bring some water from the Ganges because he was about to perform a fire sacrifice. So she went to the Ganges, and as she was filling her pot with the water from the Ganges, she saw Chitraratha. Chitraratha is the king of the Gandharvas. And there he was in the company of many apsaras having fun in the water. Well, as I was saying before, Gandharvas are very beautiful. The king of the Gandharvas obviously is very, very beautiful. So Renuka saw him and she felt somewhat inclined towards him and forgot. So basically she stood there in trance watching him. And she forgot that the time for the sacrifice had passed and her husband was still waiting. So she hurried back home and she was really afraid that now her husband is going to curse her. So returning quickly, she simply put the water pot, I should say, in front of her husband, and she stood there with folded hands, with her head down. Jamdagni very quickly understood the adultery in the mind of his wife. Mind, she didn't do anything, just in the mind of his wife. And in great anger, he asked his sons to kill her. That's some anger of a Brahmin. But the sons refused. They said, we're not killing. And then very soon, Parashuram, the youngest son, showed up. And Jamdagni asked his youngest son, Parashuram, to kill all his brothers, and the mother, because they had disobeyed the order. And the mother had mentally committed adultery. So without hesitation, Parashuram took his chopper and killed his mother and his brother immediately, which pleased Jamdagni very much. That's what an obedient son I have. And he offered him any benediction that Parashuram wanted. But Parashuram said, let my brothers and mother live again, and let them not remember that I had killed them. So Jamdagni said, Tathastu, so be it. And by the benediction of Jamdagni, both the mother and the brothers, they were immediately, revived, or they came alive. And they were very happy because they thought they had just awakened from a deep sleep. So nobody knew what had actually happened. However, those sons of the king, Kartavirya Arjun, were plotting against Parashuram because they had watched him kill their father and the soldiers. So they wanted to take a revenge. So therefore, one day, I guess they were stalking Parashuram. One day when Parashuram was absent from the ashram of his father, they went in and they cut Jamdagni's head off, right in front of his wife. She was pleading for his life, but they wouldn't listen. And they cut his head off and took it away with them. When Parashuram returned to the ashram and he saw his father killed, he was I can imagine, he was very, very upset. And he asked his brothers and his mother, who did that? And they told him, these were the sons of Kartavir Arjun. So once again, he picked up his chopper and his bow and arrows and he ran after the sons and went to the capital of the king. I think the name was Mahishpatipura, and he killed all the sons. And there were so many of them that Bhagavatam says that there was a whole river formed by the blood of these sons, and the heads put in one place became like a mountain. There were so many of them. But Parashuram was not satisfied with killing just the sons. So later, when the Kshatriyas became a little more rowdy again, he killed them all. And because they kept on causing disturbance, he kept on killing them. So 21 times he got the earth completely rid of Kshatriyas. Anyway, so after killing the sons of Kartavirya, Parashuram picked up the head of his father, brought it back to the ashram, and started performing 5 sacrifices to satisfy the Lord who appeared. And as the result of this process, the head of Jamdagni became properly joined to the body, and he came back alive. Later on, because he was performing so many 5 sacrifices and was a good Brahmin, was promoted to higher planetary system, and he became one of the 7 sages called Saptarishis. Parashuram later on had the encounter with Lord Ram and Lord Lakshman during the marriage ceremony, just before the marriage ceremony of Ram with Mother Sita, when he broke the bow of Lord Shiva. But anyway, Lord Parashuram is still alive. He's living on Mahendra Parvat. And in the next Manvantar, he will become a preacher of Vedic knowledge. And he'll also become one of the Saptarishis. So I'll pause again, see if there are any questions or comments before I move to the next chapter. Anyone? Okay, all right.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Ha, Mother, yes.
I've heard that Parashuram will spare any Kshatriya who gets married and he will not kill them. Is that true? Like, so every time a Kshatriya, no, I heard in a lecture that Parashuram will not kill any Kshatriya who gets married, like when he goes to kill them. Is that true?
So what I have read, I have not heard that, but what I've read is that if a man is surrounded by women, then he will not kill him. So as a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, we talked about a king who was surrounded by women, and that became his Nari Kavach, which is the shield of women. And Lord Parashuram left him alone, and then he became the father of all the subsequent Kshatriyas. So we discussed that, I think, either a week or 2 weeks ago. So yes, slightly different version, but I have read that anyone who's surrounded by women will not be killed by Lord Parashuram.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. Anybody else?
Prabhuji, I just want to confirm, like Lord Parshuram was a Brahmin by birth, but he has qualities of a Kshatriya.
Correct. That is correct. Remember, I was talking about the oblation by his grandfather. So when his grandmother had requested, he had said, okay, your son would be Brahmin, but because of the oblation, now your grandson would be Kshatriya. So that's why we said that it's not a caste system, it's Varnashram. So by qualities and by activities. Okay. Anyone else? All right, then I'll move on. So the next chapter basically talks about a whole lot of names in the dynasty of Pururava. So I'm going to skip that chapter and go to chapter 18, which is about King Yayati. Now, King Yayati is a very famous king, and I'll tell you why. Remember, we are still talking about the dynasty of Pururava and Urvashi. So he was in that dynasty. His father, King Yayati's father, was a very famous king by the name of Nahush. Now, Nahush, one time, being puffed up again, he molested Indra's wife, Mother Shachi. She complained to Agastya Muni, who was I think was just performing some austerities in the neighborhood. And he cursed Nahusha to become a python, because pythons are very bad creatures. So, Nahusha's second son, Yayati, became the king because there was some, and I don't know the details, but there was some intrigue that happened that made his oldest son, Nahusha's oldest son, ineligible to be the king. So, for example, you recall from the story of the Kauravas and Pandavas, Dhritarashtra was the eldest son, but he was disqualified because he was blind. So I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but somehow the eldest son of Nahush was disqualified, and second son, Yayati, became the king. Now I'm going to tell you the story about how Yayati married Devyani, the daughter of Shukracharya, who, as you know, Shukracharya was a Brahmin. Even though he was the spiritual master of the demons, he was a Brahmin, which means his whole family, sons and daughters, would be Brahmins. And Yayati is a Kshatriya. So the Shastric regulation is that a man can marry a girl from a lower Varna, not higher Varna. So the hierarchy of the Varnas is Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So if a Brahmin man marries a Kshatriya woman, it's okay, allowed. If a Kshatriya marries a Vaishya girl, that's allowed also. And as we know from the story of Nanda Maharaj, his grandfather, great-grandfather, Devmir, had married a Kshatriya girl and married a Vaishya girl also. So the son who was born after Kshatriya girl was a Kshatriya by the name of Shursen, the father of Vasudeva. And the boy who was born after Vaishya girl was Parjanya, who became a Vaishya, taking care of agriculture. So that's why Nanda Maharaj called Vaishya family, and his stepbrother Vasudeva is called Kshatriya because of that reason. So same idea here. However, this was the opposite, the Kshatriya marrying a Brahmin girl. So King Parikshit, as alert as he always was, he asked immediately, Shukadeva Maharaj, please explain why this uncommon marriage of Kshatriya King Yayati with the Brahmin girl Devyani happened. So Shukadeva Goswami told another story. He said, once upon a time there was a king by the name of Vrashparva. He had a very beautiful daughter by the name of Sharmishta, who was the same age as Shukracharya, who was the priest of King Vrashparva. So the daughter of Shukracharya, Devyani, was the same age as Sharmishta. So they were friends. So one day Sharmishta, along with literally thousands of our friends, girlfriends, including Devyani, decided to go to a lake and sport in the water. So they took off their clothes, they put them on the bank of the river, or the reservoir, I should say, and they went to the water. Suddenly they saw that Lord Shiva with his wife Uma is passing by riding his bull. So when the girls saw that, they were naturally very embarrassed. They immediately came out and dressed themselves up, so as not to be embarrassed by Lord Shiva or embarrass him from having to see them without clothes. But by mistake, just by mistake, Sharmishta, the daughter of the king, put on the clothes of Devyani, the daughter of Shukracharya. Well, it was a genuine mistake, but that made Devyani very, very angry. And she started, letting Sharmishta have it. She was rebuking her very severely, chastising her like anything. And she started to compare the daughter of the king, Sharmishta, with a Shudra, saying, you're like a Shudra who's trying to take charge of Vedic knowledge. As everybody knows, Shudras are not allowed to do that, or were not allowed to do that. Therefore, she was basically saying, you've done something you're not allowed to do. You don't qualify to wear my clothes. Well, Sharmishta, after all, was the daughter of a king, Kshatriya blood, and so she got angry in return when she heard the cruel words of Devyani. And she responded by rebuking Devyani in return and called her a beggar. I said, you are a beggar who does not understand your position and you talk too much. You don't understand. You are living on what we give you in charity. And she was still mad. She was not satisfied having said all this. And she pushed Devyani down into a well and went home. So now Sharmishta is at home. Devyani is in the well without any clothes on. So now this King Yayati, who was on a hunting excursion, happened to come to that well because he was thirsty. He wanted some water. But he looked down the well and he saw Devyani without her clothes on, looking up, asking to be helped. So he caught her by his hand and lifted her up, thus rescuing her. Well, in those days, actually, not just those days, even as recently as maybe 50, 60 years ago, if a man touched a woman's hand, that was considered marriage or this huge problem. So Devyani immediately accepted Maharaj Yayati as her husband. And she told him that you have accepted my hand by holding it, and therefore I am your wife. And she said, this is an arrangement of the Lord, because otherwise, why would I be in the well? Why would you come here at this time? So therefore, you cannot say no. And she also explained to him that long time ago, well, I don't know how long ago, but some time ago, she had cursed the son of Brihaspati, or one of the sons of Brihaspati, whose name is Kach. And he cursed her back by saying that you are a Brahmin, but you will not have a Brahmin husband. You will have a Kshatriya husband. So she said, also that curse is coming true. You are Kshatriya, therefore you have to marry. But as I was saying before, this is a Brahmin man marrying, a Kshatriya man marrying a Brahmin girl is not sanctioned by the regular scriptures. So King Yayati did not want to marry her. He did not like it, but two reasons. One, he also was convinced that this is the arrangement of the Lord. And also second reason, he was really, really attracted by Devyani's beauty. So he accepted her request. Well, Devyani went home to her father, Shukracharya, and told him the whole thing about how Sharmishta had taken her clothes, and then she had rebuked her, and then she had pushed her into the well. When Shukracharya heard that, he got really angry, and he was going to let her father, Sharmishta's father, Vrishparva king, to really, really chastise him, let him have it, as they said. Vrishparva, as soon as he saw Shukracharya coming towards him in a great mood of anger, he knew what has happened. So he started to offer his, obeisances and his prayers and nice words to pacify him. And so Shukracharya said, well, I will not be satisfied until my daughter is satisfied. And he invited his daughter Devyani to say whatever she wants. So Devyani said, when I go to my husband's place after marriage, I want Sharmishta, the daughter of the king, to accompany me as my maid servant. So Vrishparva, being somewhat selfish, I guess, he said, my life versus my daughter's life. He chose his, and he agreed to Devyani's demand, and sent Sharmishta as one of the maid servants who were given as dowry to the husband of the girl. So when the marriage happened, Yayati took Devyani and all the maid servants with him. Sharmishta went along as a maid servant. But Shukracharya was concerned that something bad may happen. Just give me 1 second. Got to turn the light on. Anyway, so Shukracharya warned Yayati that, look, you're taking Sharmishta with you to your palace, but she's very beautiful. So let me warn you, do not ever sleep with this girl Sharmishta. Well, Yayati did not say anything, went home with his wife and the whole entourage, and time was going by, and Devyani had a son. When Sharmishta saw Devyani with his son, she also developed a desire to have a son. So she approached King Yayati with a desire to have a son with him. And the king agreed. As a result, Sharmishta had not one, not two, but 3 sons. Very soon the news got to Devyani that Sharmishta has 3 sons, and she figured it out that the father was her own husband, which made her very envious and very angry. And in her great anger, she left for her father's house, got there and told her father the whole story about how Yayati had 3 children with Sharmishta, which made Shukracharya very angry also. And he cursed King Yayati to become very old, completely disfigured and invalid. When Yayati heard that, he begged Shukracharya to be please kindly be merciful upon him. And he said, I still have not satisfied all my lusty desires, so please don't give me this curse. So Shukracharya said, okay, fine. I cannot take my curse back, but I'll modify it. And I'll say that if you can get somebody to exchange your old age with his youth, then you'll get your powers back and you can continue to enjoy your life and satisfy your lusty desires. So Yayati got home, called his eldest son, whose name was Yadu. I said, will you please exchange your youth with me because I still want to satisfy my desires. And Yadu looked at him, kind of rolled his eyes and said, no way, not a chance. I want to enjoy my life too. I'm young and I want to enjoy my life before I take renunciation. So no, I'm sorry. Yayati called the other, he had 5 sons. She called other 3 sons, they also refused. Finally, Yayati called his youngest son, whose name was Puru, and requested that he exchange his youth with his old age and invalidity. Puru agreed. So now Puru became very old, disfigured and invalid, and Yayati became young man again and started enjoying for thousands of years with his wife and other girls, but again, is still not satisfied. So that's the end of this chapter, and I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions or comments before I continue. No questions, comments? Okay, all right. Everybody's awake, right? Somebody say yes, please.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you.
So far awake.
Okay, so far. Okay. Well, so after many, many years of having this enjoyment of the material world, Yayati finally became disgusted with his life and all the materialistic happiness he was getting. He finally said, I don't know if I did the right thing. So he went to his wife, Devyani, and he narrated a made-up story. And he started to talk about actually his life, but the characters in his story were two goats, a he goat and a she goat. He said, once upon a time, there was a he goat in a forest looking for different kinds of vegetables to eat. And by chance, he came to a well. And in the well, he saw a she goat, very beautiful she goat. And he became very attracted to her. And somehow he managed to take her out of the well. And now they were looking at each other. She goat also became very attracted to him. And they got married. After the marriage, one day, the she goat saw her husband, the he goat, enjoying with another she goat, which made her very angry. She abandoned the he goat, returned to her Brahmin owner, and described her husband's behavior to him, the owner. The Brahmin owner became very angry and cursed the he goat to lose all his sexual power. When the he goat realized that, he went to the Brahmin and begged his pardon and begged so much that he was given back his power for sex. And the he goat enjoyed with she goat for many, many years, but still not satisfied. Again, because it's like, putting butter on fire. You don't extinguish fire by putting more butter on it. So it's not easy to extinguish such a fire by doing more of what you're doing, and you have to have a different process to extinguish. So in the case of real fire, it's not the butter or clarified butter, but it's the water that would do it. So the Shastras therefore advise that using one's intelligence, one should renounce the life of enjoyment. But it also warns that, just the endeavor without knowledge is not going to be enough to give it up, especially when it comes to a he-she relationship. Because, again, Bhagavatam says that a beautiful woman can bewilder even the most learned man. So King Yayati continued his story. He said, even after 1,000 years, my desires have not decreased, rather they have increased daily. So now I'm at a point where I'm willing to give up all these desires and I'm going to go meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yayati called his youngest son Puru and re-exchanged, or returned, you can say, his youth with Puru's youth. So now Yayati became an old, decrepit old man, and Puru became young again. Yayati then renounced the worldly life. He divided his property among his 5 sons and personally adopted the life of a mendicant or a sannyasi, gave up all his attraction to the material things or material enjoyment, and became fully engaged in the performance of devotional service. And finally, he attained perfection. Later on, his wife Devyani also said, what kind of life am I living? This is all mistaken way of living. And she also engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. And they both achieved perfection from that. End of the chapter. Therefore, I'm going to stop again. see if there are any questions or comments.
Prabhuji, I just have one observation, and if you can comment on it.
Uh-huh.
So one thing that I've noticed is in these all these stories, there's a vast change in the life of a person, and at the end he's able to achieve, if not the perfect, but still quite desirable stage. So eventually there's this good that he's able to achieve. However, like from my life, what I can see, the transition, it's so slow. It's very difficult to just envisage that it can go from one extreme to other, and just within one lifetime. I know the life duration is different, but yeah.
So very good observation. There's two things. One is understand that only the very extraordinary people are mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. Certainly any detailed history of the people who are mentioned are very extraordinary people. So they are able to do things that are very hard for us ordinary people to do. So that's one thing. The second thing is that everyone comes to the conclusion that material world is not worth living, and material enjoyment actually is a source of all our material miseries. So as Lord Krishna says in chapter 5, text 22 of Bhagavatam, Gita, yehi sasparsha bhoga dukh yoniya evte. He's saying that all these material enjoyments, material happiness, is actually a source of miseries. And very few people are able to come to that conclusion. And he's saying that only those who come to that conclusion are able to focus on devotional service. So as a matter of fact, you often hear the comment that we cannot become pure devotees until we have come to the conclusion that the material world is a miserable place, not worth living in. Until we are convinced, we will not become pure devotees. Becoming convinced of that makes us extraordinary person also. And then we are able to do it. Right now, we kind of know, so we are kind of trying to get to pure devotional level. So, I mean, we read the books, we understand at an intellectual level, but not at the realization level. That's why we're not able to translate our bookish knowledge to practice. And that's the difference. So your observation is absolutely right on. And also that, why we struggle so much. So, I mean, it is possible we get mercy of the Lord, mercy of a pure devotee, or we become so, absorbed that we do finish in one lifetime. But for the majority of us, we are looking at quite a few lifetimes. But as long as we keep choosing to stick with the service to the Lord, one day we will get there. And that's the guarantee. That's the guarantee of the Lord. That's the guarantee of the scriptures. So there's a lot of hope. And Krishna has done a wonderful thing by making any devotional service we do eternal. So we never lose whatever we have done. We only start from the point where we left off. So there's a lot of hope.
Permanent bank deposit.
Huh?
Permanent bank deposit.
Permanent bank deposit. That's exactly right. Exactly.
No loss.
Neha Vikram Nashasti. We never lose it.
So, Prabhu, I have a question.
Yeah, Prabhu, go ahead.
I don't know if I'll be able to explain it, ask the question properly or not, but we hear in all these stories from different yugas that, the Gandharvas get attracted to this woman, the demigods getting attracted, Indra getting attracted, So in those yugas, the purity was at a very high level, and they knew all the mantras and the shastras, and they were more knowledgeable than what we are today. So then why is it that we say that, Kali Yuga is more bad in these areas, and sexual desire is very high? So if it was that high in those ages, then why do we say that Kali Yuga is even worse than those ages?
Right. So good question. And you explained it very well. So I understood what you're asking. So Prabhu, again, multiple answers. So one is that if you're talking about the demigods, understand the only reason they became demigods is that they performed pious activities with the desire to enjoy life. So once they become demigods, they become experts in enjoying, and they are constantly enjoying. As soon as you get to the point where you want to enjoy, and it's about your enjoyment, the envy, the cheating, and all those kind of things automatically occur. So you hear these stories where somebody became lusty after somebody else, and all this, intrigue starts to happen. I mean, imagine the moon god making his Guru Mata friend. I mean, how bad is that? It's all because of the constitution of the demigods. They're not pure devotees. They're devotees. They're pure devotees. They're more into their own enjoyment than anything else. That's why Indra is doing so many abominable things, makes him so insecure. He does all these other things like stealing the horse from a fire sacrifice, on and on and on. They're not pure devotees. However, coming to Kali Yuga, the difference is the degree to which and the percentage of the population who does these things. So yeah, Srimad Bhagavatam mentions a few incidents over a period of millions of years by a few people in the population of billions, right? Even at any given time, there are 330 million demigods, and we might hear about 5, right? So that's not so bad. In the age of Kali Yuga, 7.2 billion population, and I think 7.19 billion people will be in that category. That's the difference. That's the difference. They're talking about, for example, just a week ago, 16-year-old boy was driving at the speed of 120 miles an hour in a kilometers an hour in a 30 kilometer zone residential street. And his Mercedes jumped over a curb, landed on the 2 kids. As the father was watching. And that's Kali Yuga symptom. Right? Now they're saying that there will be time in Kali Yuga when 5-year-old girls will be pregnant. And we already hear so many examples of kids killing their parents. Kids throwing their parents out of the house. Parents' house, throwing them out on the street, not caring. Those are the symptoms of Kali Yuga. So it's the extreme and the amount and the frequency that makes a difference. Otherwise, even Sati, we have Hiranyakashipu. Right? Even Pururava started Sati Yuga and ended up in Treta Yuga. So bad elements have always been there, eternally. It's just the numbers are different. Even the time of Lord Ram, there were so many demons disturbing the fire sacrifices of Vishwamitra Muni and other sages. So bad elements have always been there. It's the number. Okay?
Prabhuji, your answers are perfect.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else?
That is why he is Shiksha Guru.
Hari Bol. Thank you, Prabhuji. Okay, I'll continue, otherwise I'll run out of time. So now we're going to talk about dynasty of Puru himself. So remember, who was Puru? Puru was the one who exchanged his youth with his father Yayati. So one of his descendants was Dushmanta, also known as Dushyant. It's a very famous story of Shakuntala and Dushyant. Like even those people in India who have never read Bhagavatam probably know the story. Anyway, so once King Dushyant was going through a forest, hunting, and he got near the ashram of a very famous rishi, actually Maharishi, by the name of Kanva, Kanva. And there he saw a beautiful woman sitting there playing with a deer. Actually, she was not playing, but taking care of a deer that King Dushyant had wounded. So he saw the woman and he became very attracted to her. That woman was the daughter of Vishwamitra and a Apsara by the name of Menaka, and her name was Shakuntala. So Menaka had also left Vishwamitra immediately upon the birth of her daughter Shakuntala. Vishwamitra said, I don't know how to take care of daughter. I'm a Muni. So he also left. So basically both parents abandoned this newborn baby. So Kanva Muni found her and he brought her to his ashram. And he raised her and maintained her. Anyway, so that's Shakuntala. So when Maharaj Dushyant saw her, he fell in love immediately. And they started talking and wandering, and they got married. So Bhagavatam says in Gandharva style. Gandharva style is basically where there's no pujari, there's no priest, there's no going around the fire 7 times, no mantras. You just extend the garlands and you get married. So that's how they got married.
Like
and, later on, Shakuntala became pregnant by her husband, and before he realized, King Dushyant had left the ashram of Kanva Muni for his kingdom, promising to return to take Shakuntala back with him. Well, some time went by. One day, Shakuntala was sitting in her ashram, totally lost. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned that. And a son was born, and I'll talk about him in a second. So she had a son, and one day she was sitting there in her ashram, thinking about her husband. And she was so lost in the thoughts of her husband, she did not see or notice Durvasa Muni coming into the ashram. So imagine the scene. She's sitting on a seat, totally daydreaming about her husband. And Durvasa Muni comes in, she doesn't get up, she doesn't notice him. What do you think Durvasa Muni would do? Get angry as he normally does. And he feels insulted. And he cursed her. He cursed her and said, the person you're thinking about right now will completely forget you. She was still so lost in her daydreaming, she didn't hear. But one of her friends heard, and she rushed to Durvasa Muni, offered her obeisances, and explained the whole situation to him, how she was married to this King Dushyant, and he had left her, and she was thinking about him, and did not notice him, Durvasa Muni, coming into the ashram. So she begged for forgiveness on behalf of Shakuntala. So Durvasa Muni, once having understood what had happened, he calmed down and he modified his curse. And he said that whomever she's thinking about, he will remember her again once she shows him something that he has left with her as a personal token. Well, so what happened was that before King Dushyant left the ashram of Kanva Muni and his wife, he gave his royal ring to her to wear. And so after some time, she was still waiting for Dushyant to come back. He didn't. So one day she was near on the bank of the river, and basically with her hand, she was making waves in the water. And the ring slipped in the water. She looked for it, didn't find it, so she came home. And long time passed by. So finally she decided that that she was going to approach the king herself. So she took her son. Oh, I should have mentioned, her son's name was Bharat. And he was so strong and so powerful that even as a child, his favorite sport was to grab a tiger or a lion, and open his mouth and count the teeth of the tiger or lion. And it was so powerful, they were totally helpless in front of him. Anyway, so she took her son, Bharat, and went to with another person and went to the kingdom of Dushyant. There she introduced herself as his wife and Bharat as his son. And as per the curse of the Rasa Muni, Dushyant said, I don't know who you are. I don't know why you are claiming to be my wife. I think you're after my kingdom. If you don't go away now, I'm going to punish you. Now she was really perplexed what to do. So as she was trying to figure out how to convince him, there was a voice from the sky that said, no, my dear king, she really is your wife. But the king still was not convinced. Again, by providence, at the same time as this dialogue was going on, a fisherman who had happened to catch a fish who had swallowed the ring dropped by Shakuntala, and when he cut the fish open, found the ring, noticed that it's a royal ring, so he was going to the king to return the ring. So as soon as he returned the ring to the king, by the modified curse of the Rasa Muni, his memory came back. So now he had two proofs, his own memory by seeing the ring and the voice of the sky. So he accepted Shakuntala immediately as his wife. Well, after his death, Bharat became the king, and he performed many, many great sacrifices. And he was famous for giving in charity. Like he would go away, 33,000 horses and 1.5 million elephants, elephants with white tusks and black bodies in charity, and kept doing that. And he was very pious king. He killed anybody who opposed the principles of Brahminical culture. A very, very good king. He had 3 wives. They each bore children who did not resemble him. So they got scared and they killed their own children, thinking that the king would think they are unfaithful to him. So the King Bharat was very frustrated that he didn't have a son. So now a very strange story happens. He performed a sacrifice named Marut stone and satisfied the demigods known as Maruts, who presented him with a son whose name was Bharadwaj. And this very strange story of Bharadwaj. So basically going back, Brihaspati, the spiritual master of the demigods, he became attracted to his brother's wife, Mamta. And he desired to have a relationship with her and made her pregnant. I'm sorry, I forgot something. The wife was already pregnant. So there was son growing in the womb of his wife. And son realized what Brihaspati was trying to do. So he spoke up from inside the womb and said, do not dare do this. But Brihaspati completely ignored and raped Mamta. Now Mamta was very scared that her husband would leave her because now she was going to give birth to an illegitimate child, and she considered giving up the child. But the demigods, especially the Maruts, intervened, and they said, we'll call this boy Bharadwaj, because Dwaj means a son, or I should say illegitimate child. And so when Bharat was performing the fire sacrifice to satisfy the Maruts, they gave this child, presented this child to King Bharat and said, this will be your son. It's probably a complicated story, but I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions or comments. But we have to rush because it's almost 9:30 and I have one more chapter to cover. Any quick questions? Okay, then I'll move on to the dynasty of Bharat, and I'll talk specifically about a king by the name of Rantidev, who was not only a great king, but also an exalted devotee. He loved everybody, and he saw everybody in relationship with the Lord. And he was always involved in worship and performing devotional service. And he was so exalted that sometimes he would give away his own food in charity, even though he and his family were still fasting. Once Nandideva was fasting and his family was fasting for 48 days, not even water. Finally, excellent prasadam was offered to him, and he was about to honor it when a Brahmin appeared. He said, I'm very hungry. So Nandideva gave immediately a portion of the prasadam to this Brahmin. Brahmin left. Nandideva was about to start honoring prasadam again, and a Shudra appeared. He said he's very hungry. So he again gave part of the prasadam to the Shudra. And just as he was about to eat the remaining prasadam, another guest appeared. And he gave it all to this new guest. And he was going to be content with just simply drinking water when another guest came and said, I'm very thirsty. And this was actually Chandal, more than Shudra. And then they gave some water. And he was at the verge of death, along with his wife and the rest of his family. At that time, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva appeared, and they said, we were the ones who appeared as Brahman and Shudra. We were testing you. Now, you are blessed. You become a great devotee of the Lord because you've shown how tolerant a devotee is. And you're delivering or rendering wonderful service to the Lord. They blessed him and basically blessed him to become a pure devotee of the Lord. So I'm going to stop here. It's 9:30 exactly. Except I'm going to mention that one of the descendants of Bharat was also Ajamir, whose descendant was Drupad, whose daughter was Draupadi. And obviously in this dynasty also we had King Shantanu, whose son was Bhishma Pitama. So very, very, very famous dynasty with very powerful kings and all those kind of things. So I'm going to stop here. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Namanga Prabhu, you have a question?
Yes, Prabhu. So Prabhu, we just heard about Ranti Devi, how he had been tested to that degree of surrendering. So,
Prabhu, I'm having difficulty hearing you. Can you please repeat and get closer to your laptop?
Yes, sir. So Prabhu, my question is about Ranti Devi surrendering. He had been tested to such an high degree of surrender process. So in Kali Yuga, what kind of surrendering should we expect? And we will be tested also to the same degree?
Well, so there's a quality of Krishna that we should talk about, and that is he tests us only to the degree that we have some degree of potency to tolerate. So for example, Krishna will never put us to the test that he put Prahlad Maharaj to, because we won't be able to withstand that kind of torture. Krishna will never put us to the test like he did put Rantidev or King Shibi, who gave his flesh, his own flesh, to the demigod disguised as an eagle, and on and on. There's so many stories. So yeah, Krishna will test us, and the whole purpose of any tests he does is to make us into better devotees by taking shelter of the Lord. And the funny thing is that when it happens to us, even the small amount of test feels like very large amount of test. But it's not compared to some of the stories that we read in Srimad Bhagavatam. But we still get tested, there's no question about it. And what he's expecting is that we will not give up our faith in the face of those tests, that we maintain our faith in Krishna, and that accept whatever is giving us as his mercy. So that's the expectation in age of Kali. That second expectation was always, but the degree of testing reduces significantly in the age of Kali, because even that reduced amount feels so much bigger because we just don't have the same degree of tolerance. However, the quality of tolerance should not go away. So the amount of tolerance may be a lot less in Kali Yuga, but the quality of tolerance is the same that we should have. And that's the kind of test that Krishna does put us, all of us, at different times, and is looking for whether or not we are able to maintain our faith in him, whether or not we are able to remain devotees despite the hardships. And when that happens, he really takes us by the hand and helps us through the testing period. So I don't know if I answered your question, Himanga Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. It was clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, but we are actually just trying to be a devotee, technically speaking, right? Because we don't have that purity that is required to be called a devotee. Am I right, too?
So that's why we call aspiring devotees. We are aspiring to become devotees. So actually, you could say we are aspiring to be pure devotees, because Lord Chaitanya, for example, defined a devotee or a Vaishnava as anyone who just once has chanted the name of Krishna. So by that definition, we are all devotees. Of course, Lord Chaitanya also defines the degrees, the 3 different degrees or levels of devotee. The second level is one who's constantly chanting the name of Krishna. And the highest level is one just by looking at whom you start chanting Krishna. So that's the real highest level pure devotee. So anyway, my point is that in one way we are all devotees, but we are all aspiring to be pure devotees. And that's why, due to our ego, due to our material desires, due to our conditioning, we have to be given rules and regulations. Otherwise, we won't even do the little bit that we're doing. So that some degree of fear is there. Fear of scriptures, fear of going to hell, fear of the spiritual master, fear of being cursed. So we do some of that. Some devotion service because of that. We do some of it because it's the order of the spiritual master or the injunctions of the scriptures. So it's not out of spontaneous love for the Lord that we're doing it. We're doing it out of fear or rules and regulations. Therefore, we are aspiring to be pure devotees. But the purpose of devotion service with rules and regulations is to get to that pure level. So as you know, sadhana bhakti is 2 components: Vaidhi bhakti, which is the rules and regulations, Raganuga bhakti. We're now starting to develop spontaneous devotion service, and you have taken shelter of a pure devotee who already has the spontaneous love for Krishna. And then the stage moves to Bhav Bhakti and then finally pure bhakti. So yeah, we are aspiring towards pure devotion. But, by some definition, we are all devotees. Okay, bro? Makes sense or no? Makes sense or no?
Yes, true.
Okay. Thank you. I thought maybe silence meant no, so I was getting worried.
No, Prabhu, every word of yours is like making sense to our senseless minds.
Oh, you're so kind.
Every word is like nectar.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank
We're
you.
blessed to have you as our Shiksha Guru, Prabhu.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, next week
Prabhuji,
we
one
are
general
going
question.
to. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Vallabhari Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Prabhuji, just one general question. When we hear the lecture or when we read, so many stories and so many characters, I see so many devotees participating in the class and they remember, oh, Prabhuji, is this character the wife of this individual? Or I don't remember, I don't know. I'm such a pure example of a Kalyug creature that I don't remember the characters. I might remember the lesson, I might remember the teachings, but I somehow never been able to remember the names of so many characters. So how can one go about it? Like to, remember it?
Well, so to be honest with you, I'm like you. I remember very, very few names. I mean, in the stories that we have read today, there were probably more than 100 names mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. I did not mention even one because I simply can't remember. Sukadeva Goswami can, I can't. And to be honest with you, most people are like that. Most, not all. Not many people have memory for names, a good memory for names. So it's not important. What's important is the lesson. What's the message of the story? That's the important thing, not the name. I mean, otherwise, like in India, there's called ratta lagaliya, which means you just crammed everything up just long enough to be able to write it back in the exam day, on the exam day. But then you forget, what's the use? So what's important is what you're doing, which is remembering the lesson. And that's what it's all about. Because, and I was going to talk about this next week in more detail, there's a reason why we have spent the last 23 weeks doing the first 9 cantos. There's a very good reason for that. So we'll talk about that reason next week. So as they say in the stories, ... to be continued. So we'll tell you the reason for having spent the last 23 weeks covering the 9 cantos next week.
Prabhuji, can't believe it, 23 weeks से हम आपको झेल रहे हैं.
नहीं प्रभुजी, actually more than
नहीं
that.
प्रभु हमको झेल रहे हैं, प्रभु हमारे dumb heads को झेल रहे हैं.
No. Actually, Mother Avni's right. I did not include the 4 weeks of Kartik Mas we did and 2 weeks of Ram Leela. So actually 29 weeks you've been telling me. So I mean, I admire your tolerance. You must be a pure devotee, because only pure devotees can have this kind of tolerance.
Pitachri, you don't repeat this sentence, please.
Right?
You don't repeat this sentence, Pitachri, please. No, and Pitachri, I don't know, you know so many shlokas, you know that, but can you give us tips, please? Because I don't recognize. You recognize so many, I don't know why. I'm jealous.
It was your humility. It was your humility to say that I am like you, Prabhu. I don't remember. I could clearly see that.
She is one of the top devotees, and she knows a lot more than she's letting us know. And as you said, pure humility. Humility personified.
We are learning from you, Prabhu.
Well, wrong teacher.
No, we have perfect teacher. We are very blessed. Thanks to Guru Maharaj, thanks to Srila Prabhupada, we have a wonderful teacher. We might not be good students.
Thank you all. Vancha kalptarubhyascha kripasindhubhyo
Patitanam pavanebhyo
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank
you,
you,
Srimad.
Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone.